With The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom releasing at a price tag of $70, people are now beginning to discuss the price of video games and is it worth the $70 all throughout the gaming industry. And I have to say, there's a little bit of nuance to this and there's a little bit of complexity that I think is worth talking about. I'm not going to do a super deep dive in this video, but if you guys really like it and want me to do that, I'm more than willing. But for now, I'm just going to do more of an overlay, a speedrun discussion, if you will, on this topic. The first question I think we need to address is $70 a lot of money? Well, that depends on your lifestyle, your spending habits, how much you make. That is a big factor on whether or not the $70 is worth it to the consumer. Personally, from GamesIndustry.biz, video games analyst Sam Nagy looks at the changing price of video games and suggests why they may be relatively cheaper than in past generations. This article, Are Video Games Really More Expensive?, was published on August 8th, 2022, almost a year ago, but I feel like a lot of the stuff that Sam found in here is still relevant to what we're talking about today in 2023. Sam begins the article by saying, in general, we like to think we know how much something is worth. The decision is based less on logic and more on emotion, an intangible gut feeling. When it comes to video games, we know when a game is under or in most cases overpriced. Unfortunately, that aptness in designating price to value is disrupted by inflation. What I like to personally do is evaluate my hourly wages compared to what I'm thinking about buying, that value price, and seeing if it's worth it in that one-for-one exchange. Now, this isn't always the case, right? There's some things that I'm going to be like, okay, like groceries are way more important than a video game, so, you got to equate those things into it. But I'm going to give an example. I'm not giving my actual wages out there, but say someone makes $15 an hour and they have their eyes on a $60 video game. If they're using my way, my process of evaluating if that game is worth it, it's, does working for 4 hours of hard work equate to this video game that will last me X amount of time, depending on what type of game it is, if it's a single player experience, if it's a multiplayer, if it's a live service game. That is kind of what I'm getting at here, if that makes any sense. A thing a lot of people don't understand is the history of video games and the economic structure, and that video games seem to be going up in price, but their value is actually getting cheaper and cheaper. Sam goes on in the article by saying this means that although the average price of new video games increased in the price of absolute terms, they got cheaper over the years in relative terms. Between 1977 and 2020, the average relative price of games declined by almost 2% every year. So although these numbers are getting higher and are, we're visualizing the number go up, the value is actually decreasing. Sam further goes on to this point by explaining, if new games were price adjusted for 2022, new games for the 1977 Atari 2600 would be 4 times more expensive today. New games for the 1993 Atari Jaguar would be twice as expensive today, and new games for the Xbox 360 and PS3 would be 50% more expensive if they were released today. The relative price curve begins to shallow around the 1990s and gets ever closer with absolute prices by the time we reach the 2020 consoles, the Xbox Series and PS5. This implies that technological improvements in making games economics of sale, efficiencies, and cheaper production values were most felt 4 decades ago. The good news is that the trend has been downwards. Basically what Sam is saying is as technology is improving, as the economics and everyone's starting to understand the gaming industry more, these games are becoming more of that exact absolute value. They're not overselling or overpricing these games. They're actually coming out at, the right price point. But now I'm going to jump off of this article and I'm going to give my opinions on this. Once again, these are my opinions, so you may or may not agree with me, and I want to know down in the comments which side you land on. But I feel like it's kind of per game. I feel like the $70 for everyone, it makes sense from a business standpoint, right? Like Nintendo is finally starting to jump into this. They just released Tears of the Kingdom for $70, and now they're saying that Mortal Kombat 1 when that comes out in September, is also going to have that $70 price tag on it for the Switch. So a lot of people are talking about that, and a lot of people talked about it with Tears of the Kingdom, but then once Tears of the Kingdom came out, everyone realized that the game was a lot more fleshed out than Breath of the Wild. It was basically Breath of the Wild 2, and that's what, honestly, it was a deserved sequel is basically what I'm trying to get at. And so a lot of people excuse the $70 because in their heads they're like, okay, this is Breath of the Wild, but now there's so much extra content, so much extra stuff. It's like Breath of the Wild plus $10 of DLC attached to it. And there is also probably going to be DLC for Tears of the Kingdom too. So they forgave Nintendo for that price point. Now Nintendo's like, no, we want to stay with the rest of the market. Why would we be charging $50 while everyone else is charging $70 for their games when we have the IP, we have the games that all the fans will just buy regardless of reviews, regardless of quality of the games? Such as Pokemon, for example, which isn't specifically Nintendo, but they have a big part of that. And that's where things start to get slippery. That's when things start to get a little bit weird, in my opinion. A little bit, like, I don't know, because the Switch is dated hardware. It's archaic. It's ancient. Like, it's so far behind the rest of the gaming industry standard for PC, obviously, but for consoles as well. And so when you have that price tag, it's like, how much more can you innovate, right? And then you're porting this really beautiful looking Mortal Kombat 1. We don't have all the information on the game yet. It just released the announcement, but they're porting it over. And so you're getting a lesser version of what it's supposed to be played on, PS5 or what have you. So already there, you're expected to pay the same amount for lesser quality. And that's when things get really, really tricky, in my opinion. And then you also have different types of games, right? You have live service games with tons of microtransactions, and you have these game publishing companies that are now releasing content half-baked. We're in a time and an era where things are so different from before. So yeah, the prices were higher back then for video games, but you couldn't patch them. The developers had to literally release the game as is, and that was it. You were done. What you sold is what you sold. If it was great, it was great. If it was bad, it was bad. You couldn't go and do a software update and have everyone just reboot their consoles or whatever, and then boom, like, the game's better. That's a more newer technological thing, and it's great. However, I feel like it's also a crutch to a lot of publishers and a lot of developers in the gaming industry, because now they have this idea of like, oh, I can procrastinate. I don't have to put up a really good product right off the bat because we can fix it later. Oh, if there's bugs, don't worry about it. We can fix it later. We can update it later. And so they're still keeping the $70, $80 soon to be price tag, and people are just giving them that money, and then they're not getting that value. They're getting a broken game. Redfall is, I think, the biggest example right now. That was a AAA, I guess you could call, title. It was $70. For consoles, it only runs at 30 FPS at the moment. It was just not a good game. And it's like, that's not the right value like that you should have been selling it for. Yes, you fixed some bugs. Yes, you did this and that. But that is not worth the price. And once again, it really comes down to the consumer. But we have so many of these loyal fans, these whales, these sheep, that will just give their money away to anything. Right? When the latest Pokemon game came out, it came out with a lot of bugs and a lot of issues, but Pokemon fans were, quick to buy the game, quick to play it, and they literally just kept, giving Nintendo and Game Freak that assurance that, like, you can put out subpar quality and still make a return in profits. And that's where things get really crazy, because these companies are not going to change the way they're structuring things or the way they're making games, because people are still paying for it regardless of the quality. And that's where I get frustrated, because I'm more the kind of person that will like sit there and wait to hear what things are about before just jumping in. Unless, so this is where it's kind of like a hypocrite, unless it's like a Kingdom Hearts game. If a Kingdom Hearts game comes out, I'm picking that up day one because I'm a huge Kingdom Hearts fan. So it's this weird thing, right? It's this weird psychological thing that I'm not going to get into really in this video, but I think now consumers are going to sit there and actually think about what games they're going to be buying. And I think that's great. I think that's a really good thing. I hope there are people out there that will not put $70 down on a service that just is like Battle Pass and microtransactions, because you're giving them a lot of money then, because you already put $70 down for the base game, and now you have to put down more money for the battle passes. That's actually insane to me. I could go into a whole nother video, a whole nother rant about the trajectory of modern day gaming. If you guys want to see that, let me know down in the comments. But I also want to hear your opinions and thoughts on the $70 price tag all around for video games, and if you're willing to talk about how you see value in video games and how you determine what's worth the purchase or not, I'd love to hear that as well. A difference of opinion is always great to hear, and having those conversations is okay to have. It's okay to disagree with people, guys. You don't need to be on one side or the other. You don't need to fence it. It's great to have discussions and conversations and debates without it being this whole thing, this whole Twitter sort of mentality. So that's all I'm going to say there. If you guys want to check out some other videos, please go ahead and do so. My content is changing slowly but surely. Previously, I talked about Overwatch 2 and my history with the game and how this new news about it and what Blizzard has done to the game has completely gutted and shattered me. I am depressed. I am a broken man. So if you want to watch that video, go ahead and do that. And I also have other videos, but like I said, that's going to be changing those structures and stuff like that very soon. So thank you so much if you watched to the end. I appreciate you so much. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel out, and giving this video a good old like, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.